Benz. Nigga, where am I going? Drop the four with my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Drop the four in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going?
We are going to another episode of HardFoul Radio. This is the show that values time and puts God first. Thank you so much for joining this wonderful Sunday, leading you up to the start of NFL games as we do. Let's get started. So, I'm talking about two things here in this opening block, and both have to do with the media and both have to do with greatness. And that is, I don't want, and I would love for sports media specifically to stop denying us and stop making us feel bad for witnessing greatness. When you watch someone who is great, you're watching greatness in an athletic ability or department or anything that you do. Anytime you watch greatness, you should be able to appreciate it. Yes, there's some fan stuff that comes into play. Mahomes is clearly great. I'm clearly biased because I root for a team inside his division. That's fine. But I'm no longer going to let the media sit there and tell me that I can't enjoy someone's greatness because they don't have what the media deems to be great, which the media has decided it's championship or bust for every single player that's ever existed. That's never been the standard, that never will be the standard, and that's not the way that I will enjoy sports. I can appreciate on Thursday night watching, in my opinion, and I think now without fact, the best player in the NFL, in Lamar Jackson, do what he did on Thursday night, and I'm not going to feel bad about it because Lamar's on pace to win his third MVP and because he doesn't have a Super Bowl ring yet. Understand something. Not every single play in the history of the NFL or the history of the NBA or the history of Major League Baseball has been judged on a can you win a title or not. That is a handful of players in the history of the sport. And with that being said, Lamar Jackson is great enough to win a Super Bowl, and I believe he will win one before his career is over. I also don't think that means I can't enjoy how phenomenal he is right now just because he doesn't have a ring. A lot of people are putting you in this, oh, he's James Harden or he's Joel Embiid. He's this great regular season player, but he plays bad in the playoffs. Dan Marino is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game of football, and that was acknowledged before we got into this era of day-to-day sports television. We used to have one or two shows a week, maybe a show on Monday after football games and a show on Thursday or Friday right before the weekend. We didn't discuss these guys because there was less time. We didn't discuss who, oh, well, he hasn't won a Super Bowl. We appreciated how great Dan Marino was at throwing the football. We appreciated how great John Elway was throwing the football. We appreciated how amazing it was Jim Kelly got to 4 straight Super Bowls even though he never won one. But now, in a world where there's day-to-day, there's YouTube, there's podcasts, everybody's trying to get an opinion out there. Now, because there's millions and millions and millions of opinions coming at us full speed, we now feel this need to go, this guy doesn't have a ring, this guy doesn't have a Super Bowl, this guy hasn't won NBA Finals, he's not good enough, he can't be celebrated as the great player that he is. I grew up in an era in the NFL, watching NFL, where Peyton Manning and Tom Brady were the two best quarterbacks. And they were the two best quarterbacks because of different reasons. Peyton was one of the first quarterbacks, you could argue the first, Breeze came a little bit later, who was consistently putting up these numbers that we had never seen before. He was the first guy to consistently throw for 4,000 to 4,500 yards, have these high-flying offenses. Him, Marvin Harrison, Edgerrin James, Reggie Wayne, Dallas Clark later. He was the first guy doing it. And we thought of him in a way that was comparable to Brady, even though their success as far as team success was vastly different. Tom wasn't considered that guy. Tom became that later in his career where he was the guy who could put up 4,000, 4,500 yards, even 5,000 yards, and he was winning Super Bowls. But early in his career, Tom was not the stats guy. Tom was not the guy throwing it all over the place. Tom was the guy, him and Belichick, they were the winners. So we viewed them in a different light, but we both were able to appreciate both as their greatness, and that's why they were the bar for quarterback play. One was the consummate winner, one was the consummate, he just looked like he was the best to play the position. Aaron Rodgers in his prime, we acknowledge he looks like he was the best. Him and Dan Marino were the best to ever throw a football during their prime. It just looked different. We could appreciate that. And I bring that up to say, Now, when we're even discussing to the Manning and Brady point, when we discuss Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes right now, Mahomes the last 2 years, he has taken on this more Brady-esque role. He doesn't have the high-flying offense. He doesn't have the super flashy numbers, but he does have the winning. He's won 2 Super Bowls in a row and potentially is on his way to win a third. But Lamar has been an MVP, put up better stats. This year is easily putting up better stats. He's on the better offense. Lamar has taken the role of Peyton Manning. There's, to quote Nick Wright, who said Mahomes a few years ago, Mahomes was both players. He was Brady and Manning because he had the stats and he had the success. Well, the last few years, Mahomes doesn't have the stats like Lamar or like Peyton. He has the winning like Brady. And so, again, there were multiple times throughout his career where Peyton Manning was considered either the best player or the best quarterback in the NFL, even though he didn't have. Brady won 3 of those 4 rings so early in his career. By the time we got to 07, 08, Brady didn't have these years and years and years stacked together of dominance. And eventually, I know Chiefs fans don't believe this, and nor should they. You're allowed to be fanatical. That at some point, Mahomes will stop winning Super Bowls, and they won't win every single year that he's there. Unless he's going to totally rewrite history, which I don't believe. At some point, he will have to put just his team success, which will start to fade, versus Lamar's unprecedented historical statistical success, which throughout their primes, it's less likely that historical statistical success is lessons versus team success. Drew Brees in New Orleans, they had 5 straight years, 7-9, because the defense was just awful. Brees was setting every passing record in existence. Individual great statistical success can still be there. So I'm here to say this. Let's appreciate the best player currently in the NFL. I don't care how many rings he has. Let's appreciate the greatness that is Lamar Jackson in this moment on this offense that we've never seen before. And let's stop letting the media tell us just because Lamar doesn't have a ring, or because Mahomes has more rings, or because Burrow got to a Super Bowl and lost, or because Stafford has a ring, that any of them are currently better than the quarterback playing for the Baltimore Ravens. Oh man. So pivoting from Lamar, and again, there's other great quarterbacks in the league, but I don't like this idea that we can't clearly put the guy who's playing the best in the NFL above everybody else. Like Lamar is clearly in the QB1 spot in the National Football League. Going from there, though, one of my favorite things to do is to trash talk media. And I don't trash talk media out of a place of disdain, but I do trash talk media out of a place of I want better. And part of wanting that better is just I want new storylines. I want things that can be talked about without just being critical. You guys have heard my rant several times how I believe what Skip Bayless and now Stephen A. Smith have done to sports media and basketball media especially has just done a lot more damage than good. And there's more people that are catching on to this now. Brian Windhorst comes out and says, NBA media is in a really bad place. Guys aren't creating storylines anymore. We're running out of things to talk about. We are just rehashing what's been done. You think? NBA media, like, what are we talking about here? The NBA media has gone on this train of, again, no one's allowed to be great until they win a ring. They didn't acknowledge Giannis as the best player until he won a ring. He was just this playoff failure. Embiid, we see it all the time. And it's a difference in if a guy is on Twitter trolling Joel Embiid saying, oh, all this stuff happened before he made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, versus when actual reporters and First Take and these shows are actually going, dedicating their A blocks to, oh, Joel Embiid has made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, I don't care what he does. So let's start, and I want to start with the guy here to my right. Let's start. I'm gonna do this every day this week, and it's going to be the storyline. I'm gonna give you 5 NBA storylines that we should be following more closely, and I'm gonna start with this guy. This guy's incredible. This guy's absolutely incredible. Anthony Edwards is a phenom of a basketball player. He has the personality you'd want, and he does something that's really interesting, which is he actually plays basketball. So Anthony Edwards is shooting, he's currently right now, he's made the 3rd most threes of any player through 9 games, and it's only Steph that's made more. Anthony Edwards, though, is not just going and chucking up a bunch of threes. Anthony Edwards, if you watch him play in pick and roll situations, a guy goes under, he shoots. A guy tries to contest, he's so athletic, he goes by him. That's playing basketball. He plays in a system. He plays defense. He doesn't just throw his teammates under the bus, and you could argue he's had the easiest teammate to throw under the bus of anyone in the NBA. How many people have been vocally critical about the Rudy Gobert trade over the last several years? And Gobert got a contract extension, which people dogpiled on even more. And Ant has never criticized publicly. Ant has never said, get me another player. Ant has never said, trade Rudy. Ant has supported him. Ant has acknowledged how important he is to the roster. Ant has done everything correct that you would want from a young NBA superstar. And yet, Ant does have a good amount of attention. I don't want to say like he's a nobody. I don't want to say it like people don't discuss him. But in the way that we do, this guy, Will and I discussed this last week, he gives you an old school feel. Like if you're an older NBA fan, this guy gives you an old school feel. He's playing defense. He's playing basketball the right way. He's actually watching what the defense does and reacting differently on offense. He's not just, playing this, congrats to the Celtics, they figured it out. But he's not just playing this 5-out offense and just shooting a bunch of threes and his stats are what his stats are. Like, he's playing basketball the traditional sense. He's playing basketball the correct way. And for the younger audience, his personality, his extreme athleticism, like we've seen the dunks that he's done on the court, like he has everything to be the face of the NBA. And I'd also like to say this to the media and to the way that we view NBA players. There needs to be a shift of where criticism really should go for guys not winning a ring. And that should be, in my opinion, solely on the GM. Not that great players don't have bad performances in the playoffs, and those should be acknowledged. But when you reach a certain level of talent and you have a certain level of a guy who's just clearly great, like an Anthony Edwards, like currently an SGA, like a Jokic, the guys who are clearly great enough to win a title, the difference of why most of them don't win titles is in their general manager. Can their general manager build a team around them to actually win? LeBron had to deal with this the first decade of his career. The Cavs could not build a team. We all acknowledge LeBron getting that team to an NBA Finals is one of the most improbable achievements in NBA history. And once he got a team around him, now whether you want to say that's because of a super team or you want to say that's because of roster construction, fine. But getting the right GM in place. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, we knew they were good enough to win a title, but the current version of the Celtics, even though they were going to Eastern Conference Finals, weren't good enough to get over the top. And then they get Drew Holiday, they get Kristaps, they get Joe Mazzulla. Like, they put in all the right pieces around them because they know, talent-wise, they are good enough to win a championship. Same thing with Luka Doncic. Again, I wasn't as impressed by the run. I think it was more of a hot streak, but still, Mark Cuban he had Luka, who's clearly good enough to be the best player on the title team. Then he gets some Kyrie, then they get some guys in the draft. They get some bigs. They get guys who are willing to play more defense because that's obviously where Luka struggles. OKC currently, they have SGA. They're surrounding him. They have Chet. Then now they got the Williams brothers. The GMs need to start being held to a far more accountable standard than any of the NBA players. Because some of these guys, again, you can't look at an Anthony Edwards, you can't look at Luka Doncic and say they're not good enough to win an NBA title. Look at the Nuggets. Jokic, clearly good enough, great enough to win an NBA title. And then they get Michael Porter Jr., even though that was kind of a reach pick at the time due to injury history. Then Jamal. Then they bring in Aaron Gordon. Like, they bring the guys around him. And now not only is Jokic the best player in the league, they surrounded him with a roster that works for his skill set. At some point, we need to start, the GMs need to start being held far more accountable than the NBA players. I just think it's a disproportionate. Not saying you can't hold players accountable to some degree, but let's start holding some of these GMs far more accountable. Oh man, a lot to talk about today. Again, we're leading you up to the opening of games. Started around 10 o'clock, so we got here about another hour or so. And so, a lot more to talk about. Some Broncos Chiefs stuff to discuss. Christian McCaffrey is back. We got Tony's ticket. This is HardFoul Radio. We'll be back momentarily. their owner is impatient, crazy, and irrational. Because I like Shane Steichen as a head coach. I do. I'm not as familiar with the general manager. I'm not going to really quote, how good or bad he is. He has gotten guys like a Quentin Nelson. If Anthony Richardson did develop, he's gotten a Michael Pittman. So he's, I believe, with who the overall talent on the roster, general manager, good. Good enough at least. Especially when you have someone like Shane Steichen as your head coach. But I do firmly believe the decision to bench Anthony Richardson was a call from Jim Irsay, who wants to be back in the Peyton Manning era where he's winning 10, 11, 12 games every single year. His quarterback's throwing for 4,000 yards. He has one of the best offenses, one of the best teams in the National Football League. He wants to go back to Andrew Luck those first couple of years, winning 11-plus games, making the playoffs. That's what he believes. He believes that the Indianapolis Colts are one of the best franchises in sports, not just that they were lucky to get two supremely talented quarterbacks. And we are back. This is HardFoul Radio. Appreciate everybody for tuning in today. So, nothing screams bad NFL product. Like, the game that's currently going on right now is the Panthers and Giants in Germany. And yes, it is just as bad as it sounds. The NFL has a huge... Now, the NFL is so overwhelmingly popular at the moment, it's not going to really matter. Also, if you're the Giants down 17-7, This is getting close to... The Saints imploded so badly that we just have ignored the other NFL teams that are on a current shit show path. Like, the Bears currently are with all of the stuff that's coming out of their locker room, the Giants with how bad it's been. But the Saints just imploded so badly that everyone's like, okay, well, that was clearly the worst situation in the NFL, and everyone's kind of distanced because no one's actively going on Twitter after a game saying, hey, I hope our defensive lineman plays quarterback, and our best / most notable player is walking away from the locker room post-game. So, but the NFL is a truly bad optics right now with bad teams. The amount of teams that are at 2 wins, the amount of teams, like the in the hunt is still, like the Cowboys are still in the hunt. The Dallas Cowboys are not a good football team, and Dak right now, the report is, which should get confirmed in the next 24 hours, he's going to take surgery and be sidelined for the whole season. He's missing at least the next 4 games regardless, and now he's potentially going to opt for season-ending surgery. And it's like, oh, Micah Parsons is back. The Dallas Cowboys are not a good team. With or without Micah Parsons, with or without Dak Prescott, the Dallas Cowboys in 2024 are not a good football team. And so, there's just a lot of teams. At one point, it used to be a few years ago, there was a thought that there were so many incoming quarterbacks that this was going to fix this. Trevor Lawrence is coming in, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, Tua. Then you get the following class. Unfortunately, the following class didn't work out well at all. That was the Ritter, Kenny Pickett, those guys. But right now, there's just not a lot of good quality football teams. And so the NFL has a real issue with, okay, like who is in music? Like I'll compare it to music. A lot of times in music, there's X amount of numbers that get released for how well music or how well a genre is doing in a certain year or a certain quarter. The problem is, a lot of times in music, that is held up by the top 5, 6, 10 artists. When Adele releases an album, music sales worldwide go up. When Beyonce releases an album, music sales worldwide go up. But that doesn't mean, but there's so many people, the reason why there's so many people that are floundering in music and they're struggling in music or struggling to put out music, and the labels are saying, no, we're not going to keep, we're not going to keep fronting the money for you because you're not worth it financially, is because a lot of this stuff is held up in the top 1% of this area. And the NFL is starting to feel like that. The NFL's, a lot of its ratings are held up in the Kansas City Chiefs, in the San Francisco 49ers, in the Baltimore Ravens, in, these top teams, the Philadelphia Eagles. That's where a lot of their ratings are actually at right now. And so, again, they are overwhelmingly popular. They have all the power at the moment. The NFL is not going anywhere. They are circling and they are doubling up what the NBA is doing, Major League Baseball is doing. Like hockey's not even a competition. So they are clearly still the kings of sports. But this is something to know. When you have so many Carolina Panthers, Las Vegas Raiders, New England Patriots, when you have, like the NFC North, we all acknowledge that's a great division. Who's great in the NFC South? We all thought the Falcons were going to be great, but they don't look great yet. And I was somebody who was on the belief that the Falcons were going to be great. You know, the Carolina Panthers, obviously not. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're unfortunately getting injured, but at best, they're just a good team. You know, the Saints, they're a bad team. We just watched everything implode in that franchise. Who are the great teams in the NFC East? It's not the Cowboys. The Eagles would be the great team, but we don't believe in their coach. Washington has the record of a great team, but it's still a rookie quarterback, still a bunch of things that feel like, okay, this is going to stop at some point. You know, AFC West has the Raiders. AFC South, the Texans, did we over-evaluate them, and they're just a good team? And then the Colts and Titans and Jaguars are clearly not. The AFC North, the Browns are clearly not. The Steelers, again, have a great record, but does anyone think the Steelers are a great team? Like, this is going to have to be the NFL's next pivot point to how do we ensure we're not doing the same formula that music has, which is just putting so much of our attention and so much of our numbers in these top 1% of artists, acts, or teams. So all of your ratings can't come from the Kansas City Chiefs. All of your ratings can't come from just these big market teams. And that's with some of these bad teams being in big markets. The Jets and Giants are both bad. They're both in New York. Those are big markets that the NFL does not want to lose out on, and both teams aren't good right now. And even though they are trying, and trust me, this is a media thing too, they're trying to get them popular. They're trying to get them in the news cycle because you keep hearing about the New York Jets. You keep hearing about the New York Giants, even though neither team is good. You keep hearing about the Dallas Cowboys, even though they're not good. They want these teams to be relevant because these teams do numbers. And the Cowboys are probably your one exception because the Cowboys are such a unique brand. They will do numbers with or without them being good. They're just the Dallas Cowboys. They're the biggest brand in the sport. But like the NFL, it's not a current NFL problem, but this is by 1,000%, this is a future NFL problem. Transitioning from that to the game I'm obviously most invested in, and potentially is my bet of the week, and that is the Broncos and the Chiefs. Look, so I loved this because this was actually being acknowledged on a lot of major networks this week as a potential trap game for the Chiefs, and I've been on this for weeks. I thought last week I know Denver got blown up by Baltimore. I don't care. The biggest, and this is, I've been on this for several weeks, and now mainstream media is catching up. The Broncos are clearly not great, obviously. But they are good too on any given day because their defense is great. They could play really good. And because Bo Nix is getting better and Sean Payton's involving the playbook more, Denver struggles too much at receiver and tight end to be considered great on offense. The O-line has its days where it looks really good and then has its days where it looks really not so good. And so, but the Broncos going up against Kansas City. Kansas City just came off an overtime game. Kansas City has more pressure built up because now it's not only just the pressure of a three-peat, it is the pressure of potentially going 17-0. And it's also potentially inside pressure of Mahomes got off to such a slow start. If Mahomes really wants an MVP, which he's talked about meaning something to him, the only way you're really going to do that is if you were to run the table. And you're playing against a team who Mahomes has thrown more interceptions against any team. The one team he's thrown the most interceptions against than anybody is the Denver Broncos. Again, the first 3 or 4 starts, he was just dominating them. If you look at his last handful of starts, the numbers are not overly impressive. He does not score on this team the way he was. Even before they went on this downside of scoring in Kansas City, he does not score crazy against Denver the way he does against other teams. Now, Justin Simmons no longer being there is absolutely an impact. Justin Simmons has picked off Mahomes more than any other player in the league. But this defense, they just got embarrassed. I do believe this is a good team, and I believe more importantly, it's a great coaching staff. And great coaching staffs, off of getting embarrassed, give you game plans that put you in these kind of games to succeed and in these kind of games to win. So Sean Payton, Vance Joseph, and I don't think Vance, because this isn't discrediting Holmes, this is a stylistic point. Lamar stylistically clearly scared Vance Joseph, where he didn't want to do what Denver's been successful with all year, which is rush the hell out of the quarterback and play man-tight cover corners with the best 3 corners combination in the NFL. But Lamar stylistically, he scares you because he could break off these big runs, and his athleticism is second to none. Mahomes is, while he does have those sneaky runs, and I'm not trying to diminish his athleticism, You're more scared of Mahomes in the pocket, traditional, like Andy Reid, which expect them to throw screens. They're going to try to do that stuff because they know Denver's a blitz-happy team. I think that will settle Vance Joseph knows, yes, this guy is great, but it's more traditional great than what Lamar Jackson presents. And I think that will help with Vance Joseph creating a defensive game plan for Mahomes. I trust Sean Payton to have a good offensive game plan. Again, this defense at some point, you saw it even in the Tampa Bay game, guys are starting to tighten up more, guys are getting dinged up more, because on defense, when you play this search and destroy mentality, it is more easy and easier to be hurt, to get fatigued, to start to get tired. Defenses normally jump out to a faster start historically in NFL seasons, so they start to struggle a little bit towards the middle, and then they try to regroup themselves for the playoffs. With the exception of like all-time defenses, but I don't believe this Chiefs team is that, even though they've been great. But I don't view them as like the early 2000 Ravens. I don't view them as the Legion of Boom. I don't view them as the no-fly zone. Like those are all-time defenses, 85 Bears type stuff. This is just a great defense in Kansas City. And so, and I think Kansas City, who, because of, even though they lost last game, they have historically in the Mahomes era, I think that was the first year Mahomes had lost to Denver, he had dominated them so well that, yes, this potentially also opens up the door for a trap game. They're looking ahead to Buffalo, and they just won. Again, Baltimore was coming off an embarrassing loss, and they wanted to show we are one of the best teams in the NFL, and they did that. Had Baltimore been coming off a convenient win or an easy win against Cleveland, I do think that score is different. I think the fact that some teams need to see, hey, this isn't working, and to fix it because they are aware that they are capable of much more. Kansas City's coming with the exact opposite scenario. And so, again, you'll maybe see it on my bet of the week, most likely. Denver, not only do I think covers this spread, which even Vegas, this started as a 9-point spread. It's down to 7.5 this morning. So even Vegas, people are putting money on the Broncos. And Vegas doesn't give a rip about what your feelings. Vegas just cares about money, and the money is heading the way of the Denver Broncos. And that final score, I'm not saying I'm going to call it outright, but we'll see. This is HardFoul Radio. We'll be back momentarily. hard left in this one. I don't even think I'm necessarily wrong, just in terms of what happened on Sunday, but I think Sunday was the first time I thought this is actually a big issue, which the hard left is, I think I'm done defending John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh, Tony has been telling me for the last several weeks, has never been a great coach. He's just been a good coach, but a message that's dying out because he's been there for so long. And I've given some pushback on that. I do think John, in my opinion, mainly because of his success, has always been he's a really good head coach. And then obviously all these guys need players, right? Like John Harbaugh inherited Ray Lewis. He inherited Ed Reed. He got a young Joe Flacco who turned into a great quarterback. But I was watching the game on Sunday and I'm like, look, man, I'm all for being creative, especially in the goal line. Andy Reid has made that really popular. All these reverse gadget plays that specifically he's been able to pull off. But the reality is, why are we doing a direct snap to Derrick Henry on fourth down? The most dangerous, most effective play the entire NFL season has been Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry RPO. And you just take it out of Lamar's hands. You don't even fake it. You don't even give him the chance to make it seem like he could be involved in the play. You just totally remove him. Hard left in this one. And we are back. This is HardFoul Radio. So, we are going to do a halftime report here as well as Tony's ticket. So, I have the halftime report here for anybody that has not seen it. It's important to be aware of what you say. And it's important to be not only aware of what you say, but to be held accountable for what you say. And so I want to do that. And so that's why we're pulling up here. We're just kind of checking in. We're at essentially the halfway point of the NFL season. I did the quarter point as well. We'll do this again at 3 quarters, et cetera, et cetera. So basically kind of going through and seeing where I stand, seeing how accurate I was with assessing teams. Now, over-unders are kind of weird in the long term because A, injuries are going to happen, B, guys are going to underperform. Like, there's just a bunch of stuff that is going to happen that's going to make this not, perfect, essentially. And so, so specifically, though, with over-under is you're trying to get a feel for a team. Like, the teams that you think are going over wins, teams that you think are going under wins, it's kind of where you view them in the grand scheme of things. So, we'll get to my division last. So, let's start in the NFC. So, in the South, I think I'm going to end up being right on Atlanta, but I think I'm going to be wrong in context. I think Atlanta is going to finish with over 9.5 wins, but I don't actually think Atlanta is as good as I thought they were going to be to start the season. There was a lot I really loved about it. I loved the Judon edition. I loved the Justin Simmons edition. I hated the Justin Simmons edition internally, but I liked what it was from a football perspective. I liked a lot of what Atlanta did. I think Atlanta will get to 10, 11 wins. I just don't think they're as good as I thought they were going to be on 10, 11 wins, if that makes sense. The Bucks under 7.5. I think I'm going to be right on this. This is unfortunately, I think they're the opposite of Atlanta in my opinion. I think the Bucks are actually better than I thought they were. They unfortunately have suffered way too many injuries. And so I think that's going to be what deters them. The Saints under 7.5. I called this. The Saints are not a good team, and they're imploding. And this is pretty much where I thought the Saints were going to be. And the Panthers are awful, so we're not going to stay here very long. The Giants, NFC's Giants under 6.5. Yeah, this is going to get bad again. If the score holds up currently in Germany, right now I still show 17-7, and so 17-14 now. If you lose the Panthers, look. Daniel Jones, there's a lot of things you can do to get benched. You guys know my spiel on this. You can losing in primetime games. You lose at the Panthers, it's a really easy way to get benched. And Brian Dable, who I think is a good offensive coordinator and I think is a good head coach, I think this is going to be really tough for him to come back from. The Commanders, this is going to be in contention for the most wrong I was. Now, I'm still not as high on the Commanders, I think, as the general public is. Again, I think the record is better than the team, but you can't take away the fact that what they are doing, Cliff Kingsbury, Jaden Daniels, what they're doing from an offensive perspective, they've scored in all but like 4 quarters this year, which is one of the most insane stats I've ever seen. So I'm going to end up being wrong on Washington, and I'm okay with that. Cowboys under 9.5. The Cowboys are not a good football team. I don't want to stay here too long. Eagles over 10.5. I do think I'll be right on the win total. I don't think I'll be right on how good. The Eagles' talent is top 3 in the league. You just start looking down like Saquon Barkley, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, that offensive line, Jalen Hurts. It's just, there's so much talent on this team. I just don't trust Nick Sirianni to not mess literally everything and anything up. There was the press conference this week that was extremely embarrassing, where he basically unveiled that he lied about Jalen Hurts having an ankle injury, but then called it rest. It was really weird. I think the Eagles will finish with enough wins. I think because of their head coach, it's impossible for the Eagles to win more than a playoff game. And if they win a playoff game, it is off talent alone. Going to the North, I was wrong on the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell, who I thought was just going to be the unfortunate. I like Kevin O'Connell as a coach. I liked him going into the season. I thought it was just going to be I thought this was going to be the injury team. This was going to be the team who they had a plan at quarterback. The quarterback goes down for the year. And I thought they were just going to have an unfortunate season due to that. I was wrong. And Kevin O'Connell is even better than I thought he was. The Bears under 9.5. This is pretty much. I think I'm gonna finish right here on the win total. I did think I treated Caleb as a rookie quarterback. I treated Caleb as a guy who was going to have issues. And even though that I was told all offseason this was the best situation ever for number 1 overall pick, I didn't totally buy into it. Packers over 9.5. They're going to finish, I think, around there. Jordan Love, who I'm still not crazy over. He's looking a lot more Favre than Rodgers. But I think there's enough talent on this team, and LaFleur's a great coach. And the Lions over 10.5. They look dominant. This is, the Cardinals under 7.5. The Cardinals are a good football team. I might be right here for the win projection, but I'm going to be wrong for how good they potentially are. The Seahawks under 7.5. Well, I was going to be wrong I think we did the quarterly check-in. I said, okay, I'm going to be wrong on this. I think it's starting to look like I'm going to be more right. Again, because they got off to a 3-0 start, there's a chance they get to at 8 wins, but I don't think they're an 8-win team, or I think they're an under 500 team. The Rams over 9.5. This one, again, I feel the Rams are one of the best teams in the NFL. They've unfortunately been the injury team, so they might get there, they might not, but I still feel good about where I put them. And the Niners have also been the other huge injury team. I still feel like if everybody comes back healthy, Christian McCaffrey, I believe, is not this week, but next week, and Debo's back, Juwan Jennings is back, like, this team will round into form. AFC South, the Titans are bad. I'm not going to talk about them. The Jags are bad. I'm not going to talk about them. The Colts are bad. I'm not going to talk about them. The Houston Texans, I think I said this a bunch when I was doing my early power rankings. I thought that I was probably being a little too high on it. I think we all were being a little too high on it, but I did think CJ was that special and had that great of a rookie season. I thought there was some justification there. I think they'll get this. I don't think they're as good as we all thought they were. Moving on to the East, the Patriots, they're bad. I'm not going to talk about them. The Miami Dolphins, this is unfortunate. This is under 9.5. I still think this was an under 9.5 win team anyway, but I think the way they're getting there is much different. They are clearly better with Tua. And for the people that were, Tua's not a force multiplier, Tua's not an impact player, I think this season has shown us he is. Even if he's not the Allens, the Lamars, the Patrick, like, he is clearly a impactful player for the Miami Dolphins, and they are a drastically different team with them. The Bills over 9.5. I think they're going to get there. I think Josh Allen has figured it out at quarterback. Lamar is having such an incredible season. We're not really looking at Josh Allen's year. But go look at Josh Allen's stats sometimes. And the Jets, I never believed in. Under 10.5. This makes sense. They fired their coach. Their quarterback's not playing well. Devontae Adams is not their savior. This is just not a good football team. In the North, under 7.5 for the Steelers. This is going to be another one of those. This is going to look like my most wrong pick. I have a hard time viewing the Steelers as much more than just a barely over 500 team get into the playoffs, lose a playoff game. But if Russ actually plays like he has last 2 weeks, and this is a huge if, you have to take them seriously. So I'm going to be wrong here. That's fine. I can admit when I'm wrong. But this is going to be one of those teams that's like, it's weird, but I genuinely think they are going to be, they're going to be better than what I thought. Even if I still feel in the end, I think they can be better than what I thought, but they will still get the same result, which is go to the playoff, play one game, lose, and that's a Tomlin season. Browns under 8.5. this is actually the worst position in football. I know they're not the worst team top to bottom, but this is actually the worst position to be in considering where they're at with Deshaun Watson's contract. The Baltimore Ravens over 10.5. Again, I feel really good about this. They've looked like one of the 3 best teams in football, even though they do have some of the worst losses. But Lamar, MVP season, Derrick Henry's running all over the place. Still feel really good about this. The Bengals, over 10.5. I'm going to be wrong on this one. No one wants to say it. I think Zach Taylor actually is the problem. I think because they went to that I think Zach Taylor, because he was so maligned getting the job, that when he went to the Super Bowl, we all collectively, everybody said, okay, he's better than I thought. There's no reason they get off to these bad of starts and have to dig themselves out of these kind of holes. Like, I think Joe Burrow is great. I think he is all-time great. And I just, no one wants to say it yet, but I think Zach Taylor is potentially the problem. The Broncos still feel great about it. We're going to the Super Bowl. Let's go. Chargers under 8.5. The Chargers are better than what I thought they were. This team has an immediate identity. Now, I do think the complaints of Herbert not having enough weapons, I don't think is valid, because they built this team for him to not have a lot of weapons. They built it to have an offensive line and a running game, which is what Jim Harbaugh felt like he was missing, and that he was going to be able to lift lesser talented receivers up. So this team is, I'm wrong. This team is better than I thought they were. The Raiders under 6.5. This is one of the worst situations in the NFL. I think Antonio Pierce is unfortunately going to get fired after a year, even though I do think Pierce is a good coach. But their quarterback situation was never going to be sustainable. And the Chiefs under 11.5. Well, look, man. While my basis of this was that the Chiefs were not going to be some dominant team, and while I still don't feel like they are, they're already at 8 wins, man. It's going to be really fucking hard for this to fall under. I still think the Chiefs are not as great as their record says, but they're gonna get to 12, 13 wins. They're already at 8. It's gonna be impossible for them not to be there. So that is our halftime report, checking in with what we thought. I still feel pretty good about it. I think for the most part, I was right about the majority of NFL teams. There's always going to be a couple outliers and always going to be a couple of surprises, and that's what makes the NFL really fun. Excuse me. Now, we have a very convoluted Tony's ticket. These are the ones we did last. We didn't get to show this last week. I didn't record on Sunday, so I just want to go over what I have been right. I would have been for the plays of the week, George Kittle, Mark Andrews, anytime touchdown. So Tony would have won you money there. The overs, Derrick Henry, already scored, but Alvin Kamara, I believe. And the bet of the week, Raiders +9. Well, this one would have been, I just don't pick on the Raiders. That's all you got to do. Just don't pick the Raiders. Like, why would you bet the Raiders in any situation? But anyway, with that being said, the play of the week, this is Tony's ticket, and I'm only going to really discuss one thing this week, and that is we're specifically going to the bet of the week. And the bet of the week, we talked about it earlier, is the Denver Broncos +7.5. Again, this line started at the Chiefs -9. It's now -7.5 for the Chiefs. You take the Broncos, you take the points. Again, everything, and I know historically Mahomes is an outlier for literally everything, but the reality is that offense is still not humming the way they think it should be. I'm not worried about the receiving core, especially when you look at Denver's corners. And Mahomes, because he's more traditionally great than Lamar Jackson, I don't think he's going to scare Vance Joseph into doing so. Vance Joseph played an entirely different game plan than what he's called all year against the Ravens last week, and it just clearly didn't work. There's no Derrick Henry who forces you to be so committed to the run that you have to change up what you're doing, nor a Lamar 30-yard touchdown run that scares you into totally changing up your game plan. You need to have, again, Denver's going to be able to line up with the receivers, are going to be able to generate pressure. Kansas City, Denver basically, yes, they got blown out, but because they got blown out, they were out of that game early and weren't really exhausting a whole lot of resources late, versus Kansas City has been in multiple dogfights in overtime. Mahomes is banged up a little bit. Sean Payton's a psychopath. Sean Payton and Vance Joseph are going to have a game plan dedicated for Kansas City, because all the progress they've made this year, they're aware of what it will feel like. That progress will hit way different with a Kansas City win versus a Kansas City loss. And so I'm not expecting I think the easiest bet is you just take Denver and cover the points and you'll be good. But I think the really cool one is if you take Denver, and these are my feelings, is I'm calling a Denver outright victory to put the Chiefs 8-1. Again, this is a division game. Division games are always tough. Look at even the Chiefs' other division games. Like, they're always tough. And even the biggest Denver hater in all of sports media, the biggest Chiefs supporter in all of sports media, Nick Wright, a few weeks ago on his own podcast said, I don't think they're going 17-0. I think one of their losses are they're going to have a stupid game, potentially the Buffalo game, and the Broncos get them once. And if the Broncos are going to get them, I think it's here. Kansas City's potentially looking ahead to Buffalo because of the dominance they've had over Denver. This is take your mortgage money, take all the money you got for your kids' college fund, and remember who told you to do it. Unless you lose. Then don't remember me. This is HardFoul Radio. We'll be back with closing statements.